Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa salatu wa salamu ala Sayyidina wa Nabina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Inna ad-dina inda Allahi al-Islam. Sadakallahu al-Azim. I would like to thank you, Burhanuddin, for the invitation to spend with you this afternoon. It is in Sarajevo afternoon, and I guess in Bangladesh it's something different. And also, I would like to say my thanks to Sheikh Mehmet Gormez, the director of the Institute for Islamic Thought and Research, for connecting us, for connecting you in his institute, and for giving me opportunity to be on the graduation day in the institute and to meet some of you there. I am honored by your invitation, especially to speak to my brothers in subcontinent, because I am in debt to the ideas from subcontinent through my dear professor, late Fazlur Rahman, whom I met at the University of Chicago. And he passed on me some of the ideas of the subcontinent, of course, of the India and Pakistan and Bangladesh and all this, which I was not aware before. And I just want to say from my perspective and having the experience of the American school and Al-Azhar and all this, I appreciate what you in subcontinent have done for the Ummah. I visited twice India in Pune. I visited Islamabad. I delivered a lecture at the Islamic University in Islamabad, and I am member of the board of the university in Islamabad. I didn't have a chance to visit Bangladesh, and I hope one day I will be able to see you in person in Bangladesh.
Inshallah.
What I'm trying to say is that the contribution of the people of subcontinent to the Islamic civilization and to the revival, or let's say re-Islamization, as you probably heard me saying, that in the last 2 centuries, Muslims have been faced with 2 challenges or 2 ways of their participation in the world. One was and still is, I think, the secularization of the Muslim mind. Secularization, I am not speaking about political secularism. I'm speaking about ideological, doctrinal, and it is not true, but somehow, because the idea of secularization, which they claim based on science, was damaged or was abused by the Soviet Union, where it was proclaimed that God does not exist officially at the time of communism, and I was born in communism, lived in communism, and I know very well what it means. On the other hand, there were generation in these 2 centuries and individuals who who have advocated the idea of a re-Islamization of the Muslim Ummah. And you know that the avant-garde was not the idea of Islamization of non-Muslims. It was the idea of re-Islamization of the Muslims who were somehow aligned from Islamic culture, civilization, culture, and in a way, Islamic civilization was as it was proclaimed to be dead. So reviving of Islamization and Islamization of the Muslim mind was particularly advocated by Alauddin Mawdudi, you know, from Pakistan, and Muhammad Iqbal. And the dynamic of the thought about the secularization and re-Islamization, I think, lasted for a long time. Now, it is not our subject to speak who won this competition between secularization and re-Islamization, but we may say, on the example of what is happening in Turkey today, that the idea of secularism or secularization of the Muslim mind failed in the Muslim societies because secularism was not originated in the environment of the Muslim society and civilization and so on. So those who were going to the West studying and being trained to bring the idea of secularism in the Muslim world failed. It is obvious. And we may say that re-Islamization, in which I count my president Ali Izetbegovic, who wrote the book Islam Between the East and West. He had his Islamic declaration when he stated very clearly, basically, that Muslims in Bosnia needed re-Islamization, meaning to regain their honor and their knowledge and their belonging and adherence to the idea of Islam, of Tawheed, and so what, and all what implies this. So let me start my lecture in a way on that notion that somehow in the beginning, basically after this First World War, when the decline of the Ottoman Empire or the global Muslim politically and economically winning, it were decades that somehow Muslims were put outside of the mainstream of the global civilizational, cultural, political, economic, and they were on the margin, basically, of the world affairs. And you may recall that basically in 50s, even in beginning of 60s, there was no one single Muslim country independent. All of them were somehow under the colonization of one or the other power, the British, the France, the Italian, in South Asia, for example, Netherlands, and so on. Now, on that notion that somehow there was a perception that Islamic civilization is out of order, that it is finished, and that there is no hope for a dead civilization, as there was no hope for, let's say, Roman civilization, Greek civilization, and so on. This is why, whether they are political or cultural, you could hear the idea of resurrection, being meaning that to come back. Now, I would like to bring to your attention a definition of civilization that is made by a British historian Niall Ferguson, who in his book Civilization, the West and the Rest said the following: a civilization is the single largest unity of human organization. Civilizations are partly a practical response by human populations to their environments. The challenges of feeding, watering, sheltering, and defending themselves, but they are also cultural in often not always religious, often though not always communities of language. Matthew Melko made the total 12 civilizations in the history, 7 of which have vanished: Mesopotamian, Egyptian, Cretan, Classical, Byzantine, Middle American, and Andean, and 5 of which still remain living, and they are Chinese, Japanese, Indian, Islamic, and Western. The interaction of these few civilizations has been among the most important drivers, but these interactions is that unto themselves for very long periods despite outside influences. As Fernand Braudel put it, civilization is in fact the longest story of all. The end of quote. I brought this quotation to somehow enlighten myself and you by the fact that Islamic civilization is counted today to be one among the 5 living civilizations in the world, which means that Islamic civilization is, should I say, death or finality, or like other civilization, as we have mentioned here, Roman and other civilization. So when you ask me to speak about the future of Islamic civilization and the role of Muslim youth, I thought that this title is very important for setting our minds toward what will happen in the future rather than just talking what happened in the past, because our past can be divided into 2 perceptions. One is glory and the other is somehow decline and somehow setting back, especially in the world affairs. So we may observe, if we want to go deeper to the destiny of different civilization and the nature of the civilization, we may observe that each and every civilization has its unique traits which it stands for. Thus, for example, the ancient Greek civilization was featured by glorifying the mind. The Roman civilization was made up by glorifying power and influence. The Persian civilization was developed by interest in body, desires, military power, and political domination. The Indian civilization was characteristic by being proud of spiritual power, while basic traits of the Islamic civilization are different from all these civilizations. Indeed, the Islamic civilization is based on the idea of a final divine message, which is recognizable by its strong spiritualism and clear humanism in the light of a creedal and cognitive concept of monotheism, tawheed. The word spiritualism is essential here because it stands against the idea of pure materialism, and the word humanism is important here because it is opposite to the idea of man, insan, being a pure animal. Materialism always stresses what is common to animals and humans, while religion, deen, stresses what makes the difference between humans and animals. Darwin did not make man an animal, but he made him aware of his animal origin. Out of this awareness, the others continued to draw the appropriate conclusions, both moral and political. A human society is a flock of civilized form, and civilization is the human awakening which goes accomplished with the rejection of prohibitions, with power over nature, and with living with the senses instead of the spirit. We must observe, however, that the question of the origin of man, that is his creation, is the question of man's freedom, because only God is able, qadir, to create a free creature like a man to be free, because freedom could only arise by the act of creation. Kun fayakun. Here we may listen to Karl Jaspers, who said, when a man really is conscious of his freedom, he at the same time becomes convinced of the existence of God. Freedom and God are inseparable. If the consciousness of freedom contains the consciousness of God, then there exists connection between the denial of freedom and the denial of God. To emphasize on the spiritual aspect of the Islamic civilization does not mean to ignore its material value in the sense of Ibn Khaldun's definition of al-hadara, civilization, who defined it as civilization is a sophistication in luxury and the faces and its manners of kitchens, clothes, buildings, brushes, and all the returns of the house and its conditions. The definition of civilization and the aesthetic and historical elements and the wonderful expansion of our material knowledge and powers, all of this is not the essence of civilization. Rather, the essence of civilization depends on the mental preparations of the individuals and nations living in the world. Innovative, artistic, mental, and material works do not reveal their true full effects unless civilization relies on its survival and development on a psychological readiness that is truly moral. Similarly, the Malik Ben Nebi's definition of civilization is worthwhile of our notice, who said, civilization is the combination of three elements, or a civilizational product which is equal to human insan, plus soil, turab, plus time, waqt. Regarding its beginning, Malik says, civilization begins with the emergence of a religious idea. Then it decline begins with the earth's gravity overcoming it after it loses its soul, and then it is resurrected. Religion in the Muslim is the mind, and this is expressed in the following equation: degeneration equal decadence of the soul plus decadence of the spirit and plus decadence of the mind. If man returned to where he was as a human being, a spirit-driving civilization, he would leave periods he spent in disputes and wars previously. We may conclude three features from these definitions of civilization. First, the first feature focuses on the material aspect of man and life. The second feature focuses on the spiritual and moral aspect of man. The third feature is the one that combines the material and spiritual aspect of man and life. It is obvious that Islamic civilization belongs to the third feature because it represents every spiritual and material production attributed to the peoples who adhere to the faith and culture of Islam. It represents a particular cultural and civilizational way of life. It represents a particular promotion of human life spiritually, materially, religiously, intellectually, esoterically, and exotically in a historically continuous way which is unique. Thus, the Islamic civilization, this is clarified in the Noble Quran when it declares that unity of the mankind despite the diversity of races, origins, and places. Allah says, "Min dhakarin wa unsa wa ja'alnakum shu'uban wa qaba'ila lita'arafu inna akramakum indallahi atqakum innallaha alimun khabir." O mankind, we created you from a single pair of male and a female, and made you into nations and tribes that ye may know each other, not that ye may despise each other. Verily, the most honorable of you in the sight of Allah, civilization like a necklace, organized by the genuities of all. The Islamic civilization is human in terms of tendency and universal in terms of prospects and extensions. It is not linked to a geographical territory, a human race, or a historical phase, but it contains all nations and peoples. Its implications are directed for various spots and places. It is a shade for all human beings, and everyone who gets its giving enjoys its warmth. This is because it was based on the fact that man is the most important and the most honored creature. Everything in the universe is geared to him. All human activities must lead to his happiness and prosperity, and that every action intended to achieve this end is a human work in the first place. Now, this introduction, I would say, about civilization, I aim to bring you closer to the idea of what I think what the role of Muslim youth should be in the future. They should remember, and they, because if you ask me what is identity, I would answer you the identity is the continuity of memory. And our problem is that we have interrupted the continuity of memory of what I have described as Islamic civilization based on spirituality and humanism. By the way, you may recall, be aware of the fact, the time of the movement of de-religioization or atheization, or the idea of the question of existence of God is not relevant to philosophers because it cannot be solved and all these things. Now, at that time, especially in Europe, they wanted to get out religion from the science, or the science wanted to get religion from its business. So this is why you had this clash between so-called religion and science, which we in Islam do not know, do not recognize. Now, I would say that the West, in particular, they succeeded in getting religion out of business as a thought, as a of worth subject to be discussed philosophically, ethically, morally, and so on. Now, I believe, and they wanted to replace religion by humanism, meaning that instead of focusing what is the nature of God, we should focus about what is the nature of man. You know this idea of the origin of universe. It was the main theme in the Middle Ages, whether universe is eternal or not. Genesis, or you know that Muslims, like some of them thought that the universe is internal, some of them say that it was created, and so on and so on. Now, this question was not solved. What is the origin of universe? And as we have it in the Quran, God said to the man, you know, you were not witnesses when I was creating the universe, the world. So how can you know how it happened? Now, after that, in the Middle Ages, there was a main theme or concern about the origin of God, whether God is son, whether Jesus is son of God or not, or you know, scholastics and all these um, uh, frictions and divisions, schemes that and new philosophy came and said, no, we don't want to discuss about the origin of man. It is anthropology and all these things. And then Darwin came and said, you know, leave all these legends that religions is preaching us about the origin of man, of Adam, and so on, and Eve. Now he found that the origin of man is from monkey. The only difficulty is that we have so many monkeys today in the world, but we haven't witnessed any monkey that became a man. And from my Bosnian experience, I can tell you, I saw so many men who became monkeys. I mean, if you want, this is, I am simplifying these things, but what I'm saying is the idea of man being becoming, or the origin of man is monkey and so on, is really mockery of that, of all of this. Now you can see all these three questions, um, cosmogony, which is the origin, what is the origin of the universe, and then about about divine, the nature of God, in all aspects, in different approaches, and the origin of man. All these three questions, those who have doubts about everything, and who are skeptical, who are agnostic, if you like, nihilist, and so on. These three questions are still remaining unsolved, except for those who believe that what is said by the divine and by the revelation, then these questions are for them clear. They know what they believe in. So in that respect, the role of the Muslim youth is, I would say, they must be selective about the history about their memory. It is not everything that we should memorize and that we should remember, and that we should have continuity of memory. You know, this is, I agree with Hegel, this Armenian philosopher, who said that uh, uh, people should read history and the past and take from the past what is benefit for them. That in our case, in our Ummah case, as I was Bahauddin when I said that yes, ulama are warasatul prophet, but I wonder why don't we, the rational man cannot be a prophet, but all prophets were rational. So we may also claim the inheritance of the prophets of his rationality, because the warasatul uqala of the Muslims, or the heirs, or those who inherited the great Muslim minds from the past, it is in the West. The Muslims are still claiming that they are warasatul anbiya, which is okay. No dispute about it. But why did we neglect the mind, the rational mind of mathematics, physics, and the knowledge of natural science, and so on, which was taking, you have this so-called, not the lost history, but tough history. There are some harami, I would say, who has stolen the history from us, and especially the history of the mind, of the Muslim mind. So I would advise my young generation for the future to focus how to be how to inheritance of the Muslim mind that we should claim. And not only this, I would like to bring them my what I call Principia Islamica, which are five Principia Islamica. I am not talking about Shurutul Iman, Shurutul Islam. This is understood. I am talking about Islamic civilization, or if I should be more specific, I am talking about the idea of Ummah, al-Ummah al-Islamiyya. So al-Ummah Islamiyya is the civilization, or is the Islamic civilization, is the Muslim Ummah, because civilization is people and things, and people. The civilization, al-Hadara, هي رجال والأشياء. هذا هو. So let me say how we can define the Muslim Ummah today for young Muslims to focus on in their studies. First of all, Al-Ummah Al-Islamiyya is Al-Ummah Shar'iyya, the legitimate Ummah. This is the most crucial issue that that the young generation must understand. There is a legitimate child. As there can be a legitimate child, there can be a legitimate idea. And to be legitimate, you need two conditions. You need to know the origin of the child, who is the father and who is the mother. If you don't know who is the father and who is the mother, who is the father especially, then the child is illegitimate. So if you don't know where the idea came from, then the idea is illegitimate. By the confession of all those, whether they like us or not, especially by French Orientalist Maxime Robertson, who said that the only religious figure in the history that we know everything about him from the day he was born, and his life day by day. And even I have a book which is a diary of the Prophet Muhammad, which he was published in Amman. So every day what Prophet Muhammad through his life was doing. About any other religious figure that is uh, holy or respected, or people are following, we don't have these details as we have about the Prophet Muhammad, and therefore we are being Muhammadan Ummah, al-Ummah al-Muhammadiyya. We as the Islamic Ummah, al-Ummah Islamiyya, we are the Ummah legitimate on three bases. On the basis of covenant with God, on the basis of Shahada, which is the identity, and the third is authority, ata'ah. So these are three subtitles of sub principles, if you like, of the main principle of the Muslim Ummah, which I call al-Ummah Shari'iyya. This is not, there is a difference between Sharia and Shari'iyya. Sharia is legal, and Shari'iyya is legitimate. So for something to become legitimate, as I said, two conditions. One, as I said, that we should know all the details about the origin of the legitimate. And the second is that this legitimate, it has a continuation, no interruption, has followers, and proven historically that it is sustainable in its substance, and that is Ummah al-Islamiyya, that is Islam. And because the Quran as a final message is the final covenant with God. You may be aware of the dispute between Jews and Christians regarding who is the holder of the covenant. And the Jews are claiming that they are the one that have the covenant with God on behalf of all the humanity. Of course, there is a dispute among the Jewish theologians, rabbis, who signed the covenant with God in Sinai, whether Musa alayhi salam himself or the Qawm Musa had the signature with God regarding covenant. But after the advent of Isa alayhi salam, of Jesus, no need to go broad about this. The church came and said, the covenant that you had with God, Jewish people, is cancelled now. Now the church is the covenant of God. We had the signature of the covenant of God. Now, because of this dispute, there was something called replacing covenant theology, replacing the covenant.
Ustaz, we can't see you. Could you please open your video, because we can't see your face.
Yes. Okay. We are now, as I said, this is for me very important subject, but we don't have time to. Okay. Now you can see me now.
Yeah.
Now let me now pass just to say this. The Muslims should be mediators between this dispute, because we recognize Torah and Injil, and we acknowledge that the Jews had the covenant with God, and also Injil, and so on and so on. Now, after Nostra Aetate in Vatican, there is a new ecumenical theology which is called common covenant theology. Common covenant theology. Now, the second principle that I would like to bring to your attention is the al-Ummah akhlaqiyya, the moral ummah, based on al-Iman, faith, on al-Fiqh, law, and on adab, ethics. The third principle of Islamic civilization of the ummah is the al-Ummah aqliyya, the rational ummah, based on three items: al-mantiq, logic, al-falsafa, philosophy, and ilm al-kalam, theology. Fourth principle of the Principia Islamica is the al-umma al-hadariyya, the civilizational ummah, by the fact of the history, continuous history of the dialectics, al-kalam, and of the dawla, state. And fifth, principle of Principia Islamica is the al-umma rafahiyya, the prosperous ummah. And this prosperous ummah is based on riyadiyat, mathematics, al-zakat, social justice, al-waqf, public good, and finally I would add sixth principle, which is al-umma al-alamiyya, the global ummah, geography, universal humanity, and Darus Salam. So all this, what I have mentioned, the target or the aim of all these processes of the principle is the creation or Darus Salam. I did not say Darul Islam. I said Darus Salam, meaning that Muslims, by definitions, are the peaceful man. Peaceful man. Muslim means literally peaceful man. So the aim of our civilization, of our religion, of our spirituality, of our humanism is to be part of the campaign, if you like, the part of those who believe in peace, because we come up, we get up in the morning with salam, and we go to bed by night with salam. And I end my lecture with salam. Peace be upon you. Assalamu alaikum.